Hey folks, how you doing? I'm Corey Cougar coming at you from the UMass Amherst Marine Station in beautiful Bayview, Gloucester, right here on Hodgkins Cove. Joined as always by my co-host, Maureen Aylward. How you doing?
Good, how you doing, Corey?
Great to do this with you,
Yeah.
and we're back for another episode of Now We're Here. We have a great show lined up for you today with a ton of awesome guests. I'm telling you, this is going to be our best one so far, our heavy-hitting one, I believe.
This is a heavy hitter.
Yeah, and means a lot to you as well.
It does. So we're talking about climate change on this show. It's Climate Wake on Cape Ann. There's been a number of different programs around the Cape this week, so we're going to focus on some of those. And we have a lot of folks just talking about different aspects of climate change, how Cape Ann is being impacted, and lots of different things that are happening, including public art project, policies that are being put in place by the different municipalities, and what's happening. And our first guest,
Yeah.
let's get it right on, Katie Kahl, the Extension Assistant Professor of Sustainable Fisheries and Coastal Resilience. She's embedded here at the Gloucester UMass Amherst Marine Station. Katie, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Katie.
Great to have you on.
see you both.
She's
Nice
our
seeing you again.
host. We're really happy to be highlighting the Gloucester at UMass Amherst Marine Station because you're doing so much great work out here.
And going on.
You're out in Hodgkins Cove, people drive by, and everyone's wondering about what you're doing out
They
here.
say, what is going on out here?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, what's going on? So tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at the Marine Station.
Okay. So it's been a busy year and a half. This summer was our first active research summer, and since this new re-envisioning of what we're up to out here. We had 6 students and some volunteer students as well. We had 3 faculty out here. We got a lot of construction wrapped up in the building just in time to welcome everybody. So the offices and the conference space, ADA compliant facilities, IT and conferencing systems have all been redone. There's still a little work to do outside. But most exciting, we put in an indoor seawater system.
Yeah, what's happening with that seawater system?
So there are a couple of really huge blue tanks on the
Yeah, you saw them on the
inside
outside.
of the
building,
building,
right? Yeah.
and that allows us that brings seawater in to a couple of different lab spaces in there, and we can basically simulate what ocean climate change could possibly do, right? So we have a series of tables, water tables inside, and we can set up tanks in different experiments in different water temperatures or pH levels, salinity levels to understand what might ocean climate change, what kind of impacts would it have on different shellfish species or lobsters or other marine invertebrates.
So what kind of specific projects are the students working on?
Yeah, so I had a student this summer working on, well, this is a seawater table related project, but working on developing an online tool to understand who's doing what where with regard to salt marsh resilience. There are a lot of researchers all across Massachusetts, all across New England, doing a lot of specific work on salt marsh resilience. This was a way to map out the projects, help connect them, help connect the research with municipal planners and other on-the-ground practitioners to try and get information together, identify research gaps, get more collaborative resilience work funded. As far as back to the seawater system, we had a student working on, and she continues to work on several crab species, green crabs, fiddler crabs, purple marsh crabs. How do their growth cycles, growth rates, how fast do their babies grow under different water conditions or water temperature conditions.
Right.
Also oyster drills, which they're like the inch-long corkscrew white shell that you see on the beach. So they are shellfish predators, and looking at, again, how fast they grow, how fast their babies grow under different climate conditions.
Interesting.
What kind of impacts are you seeing here around Hodgkins Cove? Because I think a lot of people, we're a coastal community.
Yeah.
We want to know what's happening, and climate change is a slow-moving process. So it's a little bit invisible, but before you know it, you see something happening. You're seeing some damage along with our storm surges. What are you seeing here?
You know, I worked on coastal resilience issues in the Great Lakes for several years, about 10 years, and I used to say I had sea level rise envy because you really couldn't see some of the climate change impacts there. There's no tidal system here. You know, we've got a 9+ plus foot tidal change. And as sea level rises, we will see more and more storm damage. As we see more frequent and more intense storm events, we'll see more flooding, more insurance claims, which that has a trickle-down effect into the economy, right? With a warming Gulf of Maine, the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than over 90% of the world's oceans. That means changes in fish populations. Which fish are here, which fish are coming in or moving out? How does that affect livelihoods, people who fish for the fish? How does that affect the way shellfish and lobsters grow? That's another, you know, the community depends on those economic resources.
So you're also part of a statewide group looking at Great Marsh resiliency as well, because a lot of folks maybe don't know that the marshes are in danger related to sea level rise. What are you doing in that statewide group?
Yeah, so it's I'm running a salt marsh working group for the, it's a statewide working group, not just the Great Marsh, but it's for the Massachusetts Ecosystem Climate Adaptation Network, so MassECAN,
That's
if
a
you wanted
mouthful.
to Google that.
MassECAN.
Yes, and there are several working groups. The one I'm co-running with Adrienne Pappel through the Coastal Zone Management Program is looking at well, that mapping tool that I mentioned, that is a product of that working group. So at first it was just going to be Massachusetts researchers, and then folks from Maine and New Hampshire and Rhode Island called up and said, well, we're doing research in Massachusetts. Can we be in the group? Absolutely.
Right, because we know that climate change doesn't have geographical boundaries like our states do.
Right, and we've got so much salt marsh in Massachusetts. The Great Marsh, as you mentioned, largest in New England, largest contiguous salt marsh in New England, really pristine, and acting and reacting really differently than some of the marshes down on Cape Cod and the islands. And so interesting to get all those different perspectives on a call that we're having every couple months or so. And we've had a series of lightning talks and, you know, saying how might a state program run through the CZM, which they're looking at a blueprint for coastal marsh resilience that'll be due out sometime in 2020. And getting this group together early, trying to understand who's doing what, where, and why, trying to understand where the research gaps are, what are the research priorities, how could we work better together to set some goals with meaningful metrics, how do we think about collaborative and creative financing strategies for that work. That's what that group's about.
Katie, you're doing great work out here.
It's exciting.
Yeah. Well, when do the new students arrive for this semester?
Yeah, they aren't taking classes out of the Marine Station. So the primary activity right now is happening during the summer months.
Okay.
I am teaching a course, actually. I live stream it out of the Marine Station in the spring, and certainly we are looking at getting more field trips out here from Amherst and the other UMass campuses. And looking for ways to do short courses, maybe certificate courses. We've just moved through a year-long strategic planning effort, really trying to understand what is the niche for this station for UMass, for our students, for our researchers, for our stakeholders on the North Shore. What should this be? And what do the research and education and engagement programs look like? So ask me that question in another year.
We're going to have you back.
Yeah. Is there a long view from either UMass's stance or from your stance?
Yeah, and we'll be putting that plan out in the next couple months.
Totally
I hope.
impressed Maureen with that question.
Yeah, out of left field, bringing it home. Yeah, we'll have that plan out and we'll lay out a 5-year strategy for what we aim to do. So it's exciting stuff.
Yes, it is exciting stuff to see this back in action and somebody like you here with us and doing this great work.
And so many people locally don't really know what's going on.
I know,
here.
so that's why it's so fun to have now we're here right in this beautiful location.
And actually, I've been out here by myself during the winter months last year, but we just hired a counterpart for me. She's more on, where my expertise is more on the coastal resilience side of things. Her expertise is on the sustainable fisheries side of things. So she'll be working on a grant that we just received from the Seaport Economic Council
very cool,
on sustainable fisheries. Adrienne Jordan will be out here more and more. Dr. Brian Chang, Dr. Lisa Komorowski, Dr. Allison Bates. They all have different expertise, and they were out a lot this summer, and you'll see more of them around Cape Ann.
That's great. Well, we're looking forward to hearing more from you, Katie. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks,
Thank
Katie.
you
That was
both.
awesome.
Right. Great. Katie Kahl, the Extension Assistant Professor of Sustainable Fisheries and Coastal Resilience at UMass Amherst. embedded here at the Gloucester Marine Station where we're having our live broadcast. Our next guest is Tom Starr. He's a professor at Northeastern University in the Department of Art and Design. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How are you, Tom? Thanks for being here. Yeah, this is
So,
great.
so Tom, you created this public art project that's based in Essex around the Great Marsh where Katie was just talking about
Right.
it. Could you explain your project?
Yeah, well, my project attempts to close the psychological gaps that prevent people from relating to climate change. Because so many of the effects of climate change are on a global scale, or they're in the Arctic, or things like that, and that's been a real problem. Why it's been renamed from global warming and things like that. And so the two issues are time and space. So one thing is that climate change is going to happen, in the future, even though we see some of it happening now,
Right.
as you mentioned.
Right.
But and also it happens in other places. So my concept was to bring the science right into the public realm, where people could encounter it as a landmark in the environment where an effect will actually take place. So it really was kind of reverse engineering what's in reports that live on websites that people don't tend to go to read.
True.
And bring it to the people in the street where they could encounter it. And then through that, there's a QR code on these plaques that connect them to more information and eventually to the actual data on the Town of Essex website.
Oh, that's cool.
That where the information originated.
And right off the top of my head, I immediately picture the signage at the causeway, talking about the rising sea level there as well.
Right.
Yeah,
So
tell us about that.
Right. So the way I dealt with time in this is from framing the wording of the plaques in the past tense, like as if there were historical plaques of the future from the 22nd century, looking back at things that happened to us in the 21st century. And so the dates on the plaques are usually all much in the future from where we are now, like 2057. But in the case of the causeway, there is one that's dated 2018 because, in fact, the causeway flooded in 2018.
did.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it will
The
flood
Essex
worse.
Causeway we're talking about.
Yes, it will flood worse in the future. But that actually makes the chronology of the plaques, there are 6 of them in Essex, a smooth transition from the recent past to, our future.
Well, it's thought-provoking, the plaques, because when you see signage, it's really important to actually have that that immediate reaction. 2057, what is this talking about? But it gives you a sense of time, of what could happen in a fairly close amount of time. And we're coming up on 2020. 2057 is not that far away.
No, exactly. Yes, it gets closer all the time. And I think that time travel has been is somewhat familiar from Back to the Future and other many other films and books like H.G. Wells. And one of the devices of it is whether we should go back in time and affect our future. And so by seeing these dates in the future, like 2057 or 2072, it enables people to maybe stop and think for a minute. Once they regroup and return to 2019 in their mind, what can I do, or how can I engage in this by either seeing what the town of Essex is already doing, and that was, impressive to me that on the local level, there's much more being done than maybe we would like the UN to be doing, and that people are taking it very seriously, both in terms of predicting the effects or projecting what the effects would be, but also in how they can mitigate these things. And so, in a way, reading the reports is alarming, but it's also reassuring that somebody is behaving like a grown-up and trying to confront these things in our small town.
What do you feel the role of art is in helping folks understand climate change? Because I feel like the arts is one area where a social issue, a moral issue like climate change can be seen as, can funnel understanding through art. What do you say about that?
accessible.
Yeah, it makes it more accessible.
I think, yes, by making it visual, it does seem to catch people off guard, for instance. I mean, there have been countless news stories, and that doesn't seem to affect people as much. And so I think it has a role to play. So climate change communication is actually a field because it's so troubling that people aren't engaging with it. And my field is broadly visual communication and information design. And so I'm kind of combining the strategies of public art where you put something in the environment for people to encounter, although this project is a piece of information. It's not, a flamboyant decoration or something like that. And so I was trying to combine these two strategies into something that would be, more effective in communicating what can sometimes be, dry data or alarming, just simply alarming. Yeah. So it kind of disarm people really from, worrying about it.
Anything we should look for coming out of Northeastern University's Art and Design Department?
Well, I have a colleague that's also working on this topic, and both of our projects are actually in an exhibition in the city of Cambridge, which is another one of the municipalities that I'm working with. I envision it as a regional initiative. So Essex is, hopefully the model for the rest of the Great Marsh towns. And so, but anyway, that exhibition has other artists' takes, including mine, on this, and a prototype of what the installation will be in Cambridge.
That's great. Well, Thomas Starr from Northeastern University, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for
Have a great,
really
all the way from Boston.
Well,
thank you so much.
I live
for
in
coming
Essex
up.
County, so it's not too far.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for joining us, Tom.
So you can find the plaques out in front of CK Pearl, and there's one in front of JT Farnham's.
And Canoma Point, there's one out there too.
Point. Yep, there are a bunch of them around, so take a look at it. If you're driving down the causeway, just pull over and go take a look.
Yeah, for real, it caught my eye. It literally says, in 2057, basically, bye-bye.
There's going to be a bridge coming over. We had to rebuild the bridge. So our next guest.
Yes. Oh, is this Mike?
Yeah.
Mike
yeah,
Cavallo.
Mike
Oh my
Cavallo.
God, we got a heavy hitter this time. What's up, brother?
I know, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on.
Good to be with you.
Directly into the mic.
Flipping my notes over from Mike.
Mike, you're an environmental lawyer. You've also had some very impressive appointments to the national. Tell me about that one.
So for the last 20 years, I've been affiliated with the National Council for Science and the Environment, NCSC, and had an opportunity to do some really interesting work with that organization. And I started with youth mentoring programs in the environmental space. And I stepped down in July because I wanted to come back to that space. I think it's very important for where we're going on this topic.
Right, so talking to young people, mentoring young people through the process. Tell us a little bit about what you're seeing right now. I know that you focus on the clean air, clean water.
I work primarily in the Clean Water Act space, and I'm a trial lawyer. So communicating scientific literacy to jurors is what I try to do, and I do it in a variety of different areas. I work here in Massachusetts, in New England. I also work in Georgia and have an office down there, and it's a very different type of communication that occurs down there. Our scientific literacy here in New England is much higher, and so it takes a little more convincing.
What are you seeing? You've been in a number of different positions globally, and what is your sense of how climate change is moving forward right now? What are you seeing as you go around the world and you're experiencing both, from a regulatory perspective, a legislative perspective, but also what are your observations in the field?
So I've had an opportunity to go to Antarctica back in 2018 on an expedition down there, and I was working on a paper on international environmental law involving the Treaty of Antarctica, but I was able to work with a bunch of scientists, glaciologists, divers that were all collecting data on what was going on down there. This past year I had an opportunity to represent the United Nations Environment Program for North America at the UNEA4 summit in Nairobi, Kenya. The United States had a delegation there. I was a delegate to the United Nations, and unfortunately with the current political climate, our policy folks are just not listened to. They're not taken seriously. And that's a real challenge, and it's unfortunate. With changes in hopefully more scientific literacy, people will start, I think, moving towards a better understanding as to why the space is so important and how it affects all of us in so many ways. I think on the legislative side, we're seeing some this is a very unusual time.
Right.
In my 30 years of working in this area, I've never seen anything quite like it.
Like what?
For example, that we see in California, the rollback on the
EPA
air
rollback.
I was going to ask
EPA
you about
rollback.
the
It's
EPA rollback. You mean on the car emissions?
on
Or
the car
in the
emissions,
EPA?
you can talk about the car emissions. You
Yeah.
can talk about the challenges, that are being made on the Clean Water Act side of
Yeah.
things. It's across all media at all levels, and it's a dismantling of environmental protections that have benefited us enormously
Yeah.
over the years. So we're seeing a rollback there. I believe that many of these will go absolutely nowhere. They're going to tie up a lot of courts and a lot of lawyer time. Most of those battles will be fought by nonprofits, and they're going to need our support. But there are challenges in the states. It's also draining the resources of the states. So the states are going to have to put a great deal of effort in to try to hold the line on some of these protections we've fought so hard for the last 50 years to get.
Right, and you see that in the rollback on the protections from streams and other kind of waterways, estuaries, and what do you think is the most important thing right now that folks should be aware of from your perspective and the work that you're doing?
Sure. Scientific literacy is going to change the outcome here. The more folks understand the science behind it, and I'm not suggesting that we all need to become scientists. That's not practical, and it's not realistic. What we need to do is have an understanding as to how science influences our lives. If you're a lobsterman, you know that the environment's changing. If you're I was talking to the head of a Fortune 100 company a couple of months ago, and he's the director of sustainability there. He's got the best job in this company, he says. But he's also clear to say that his company does not need more directors of sustainability. They need business people and supply chain people and everybody in their program, in their company, to understand the role that sustainability plays as part of their mission of the company. And I think as more corporations start adopting a sustainability component to their mission, we will advance the ball on the economic side of it as well as the political side.
I just think that that's just a leverage point that businesses aren't necessarily taking advantage of right now because they have this power, they're building the supply chain. Oftentimes you can really force sustainability and initiatives right through the supply chain, just like Walmart has. They've had some good experience in that. But you've got an open, audience in a workforce, right? You've got employees, and you build sustainability right into those roles and performance, and you've got an opportunity to see that really happen over time.
There's a narrative that's developed where environmental issues tend to be binary, where you're either for us or you're against us, and we have to get past that. This is something that affects all of us, and by putting our critical thinking hats on, I think that's an important component of becoming scientifically literate. It's actually the underpinning of science, right? You need to think critically about data. And as we do that, and as that develops, we're going to get more engagement. We also have to get past this notion that science and climate change and environmental protection can exist in a healthy economic climate.
It's totally true.
And that is something, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. I think, unfortunately, much of that is deliberate, but that is just not accurate, right? That's just not what's happening here.
And while you're here on our show today, you also have a talk coming up on Saturday, the 28th. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, Mike, you live in Manchester.
In Manchester.
I do. I live in Manchester. When I came back from Antarctica, I wanted to share the experience with everybody that was willing to listen. And my wife and 2 kids were tired of listening to my story, so we thought we'd expand it a little bit and put together a presentation from 8 to 80. True North Brewing had given me a T-shirt, and they supplied some free beer, so we had a pretty good crowd the first time.
I didn't get a phone call that day.
But we'll be giving a discussion tomorrow at the Manchester Public Library at 2 p.m. It's free. It's a lecture. You can come in and see some underwater video from Antarctica. You can learn about birds and whales. And the interesting thing, in 2018, we were having better weather in Antarctica than we were having here. And that was kind of an experience.
So I know. Oh, sorry, Marty. Like a passion of yours is diving as well.
It is, yes.
I know you dive locally. Were you diving in Antarctica?
I was scuba diving in Antarctica. I tend to bring my scuba kit with me wherever I go. So I was in Mombasa, Kenya, when I was down there for the Nairobi conference. I brought my gear, and I've got one continent left to go, Australia, and then I'll
beautiful.
get my 7 for 7.
Yeah.
Well, the Great Barrier Reef, I don't know if you'll see much down in that area.
Well, we're going to try to get there soon before
Good.
that changes.
Yeah, get there before it changes. Mike Cavallo, thank you so
Thank you
much.
very
It's
much.
such a pleasure to meet you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being on Now
Appreciate
We're
your
Here.
time, Mike.
Appreciate you.
That was
Thank you.
great.
That's great.
Yeah, you can look for Mike tomorrow over in
Yep.
Manchester, right?
Yep. Over in Manchester
At the library.
Public Library,
Yeah, 2 p.m. free event for you
Yeah,
folks.
yeah, that's great.
Awesome
so
work.
Our next guest is Eric Magers. He's the
Hey.
executive director
Hey.
of Seaside
How you doing, man? Good to see
Sustainability.
you.
Hi.
Hi, Eric. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you.
You too.
Thanks for being on, Eric. Seaside Sustainability has been around for how many years now? Like 5?
No,
4,
2
3?
and a half.
2.5? I'm
Really?
giving you some
Yeah.
extra time. And tell us what Seaside Sustainability is doing, because you are really ramping up some great stuff these days.
We are. So we have 2 divisions. We have Sustainable Oceans and Education.
Yeah.
In Sustainable Oceans, we're doing work in legislation. So on a lot of single-use plastics.
Yeah.
We just passed a couple of those, thanks to some really great help from Denise Donnelly from Rockport, and Leslie Whalen, and Ken Hecht. So some great people helping
This
that
is
out.
Gloucester City Council.
That's Gloucester and Rockport.
Yeah, Gloucester
we're
and
also
Rockport.
working Essex and Rockport,
Yeah.
about to do some Essex and Beverly. We have some education division, or some parts of that as well, where we have a field trip and lots of kids from essentially elementary through college coming out and experiencing our issue of microplastics and macroplastics on Cape Ann, which we have a lot of, which is kind of a bummer.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about that, because microplastics, describe what microplastics are, and I'll ask you another question
Yeah.
about plastics in the ocean.
So as plastics degrade, either photodegrade or they get into the ocean, or just in our environment, they break down. And
So
they,
say a straw ends up in the ocean.
Sure,
it's
it doesn't
gonna
even have
break
to end
down.
up in the ocean, but yeah, it can biodegrade.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently our science suggests that we are actually breathing it in right now, microplastics. So it biodegrades. Biodegradable is not necessarily the term that it used to be, but it degrades into smaller and smaller and smaller parts, and so we end up eating it. And the more plastics that's in our environment, the more macroplastics that break into microplastics. And
Yeah.
so there's a problem. So we do actually a lot of trawls in and around Cape Ann.
Yeah.
And the good thing is we don't have a lot of microplastics. The bad thing is we have a lot of macroplastics. And
All right,
they're-
what are you seeing out there? And how do plastics get into the waterways and especially into the ocean?
There's two parts, really, groups. There's consumer marine debris, and then there's fishing industry and that whole thing. And so there is a considerable amount of consumer debris that is coming from us. You guys are drinking out of that, and I'm right here. Yep. So we all have that choice of what we do with what we buy and what we consume. The unfortunate thing is that we put our things into a recycle bin that we think is maybe being recycled, and unfortunately it's not necessarily being recycled, especially if you have an open bin and wind comes along, that's just going right into the storm drains. In fact, around 90% of all storm drains in the country leads to the ocean, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's
so that's
incredible.
over 90%.
That's an incredible stat.
Well, that's why cigarette butts, all that, that's
Yeah.
number 1 in the world for marine debris. So, all that
Cigarette
cigarette
butts.
butts, flick, 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 and then,
Yeah.
so
Even if you're flicking it off in the car.
you flip it off in the car
Yeah,
and if
ends up in the ocean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
End up in the ocean. So
Right.
all over the world.
Maureen, don't do that anymore.
Yeah, no more of that flicking, Maureen.
Thanks a lot, guys.
So, and then,
Don't
so
smoke.
macroplastics, we're actually working with a couple groups on mapping some macroplastics. We do a lot of cleanups.
Yeah.
We actually have, with Cape Ann Maritime Partnership, we have 2 sea bins in Gloucester. We're testing those, so they're seem to be working really well.
Cool.
We have also a skimmer in Gloucester, down at Maritime Gloucester, so
Yeah,
those
yeah.
seems to be working well enough as,
Yeah.
as kind of like a test. So it's good.
And you're working on some issues locally that you're hoping reaches a federal level
We
as well.
are, well, actually in our other division, in our education division, we are about to launch November 1st, we're launching what's called National STEM Honor Society, Science, Technology, Engineering, Math. Maureen was critical in the development of that 2 years ago. So it's been 2.5 years in the making.
Yes.
And it's infused with sustainability. So we had this great idea of how do we get sustainability in schools across the country?
Yep.
And we came up with STEM. It's the best way to get it in because everyone's doing STEM.
Yeah, everybody's doing STEM.
Yeah, nobody's doing sustainability.
Nope, so we're just building it right in.
Yeah, well, no schools are.
Yeah.
So so it's kind of like getting into the back door of STEM. So that launches, it's kindergarten through college. It's actually our tagline's K to career. Pretty exciting.
That's exciting stuff.
We came up with that. And the other education
Note
program.
to self, patent.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember the day we came up with
Yes.
that. That was a good day.
Trademarked. It's all,
Really
everything's
awesome.
all good.
Yes,
Yeah,
awesome.
everything is good, right?
Yeah.
And then the other education program we have is Green Scholars. So that is a project-based learning and sustainability for middle school, high school. It's in lots of local schools. We've trained over 550 people to do it nationally. And then goal for 2021 is to put it on a website, so it's like a video-based. So I don't have to drive around, fly around to do these trainings.
Right,
I can,
right.
so.
Yeah, do them in the video.
Yeah.
One thing I want to ask Eric too is like you get interns from the world over.
We do.
How
Yeah,
does
this is
that-
impressive,
Yeah.
Eric. This is so impressive.
We have
Everybody wants interns, right? You're the master at getting interns.
Well, I think it has to do with my my past as being a teacher in project-based learning. But we have accredited internships in 780 colleges and universities around the world.
Oh wow.
Which means those students can get credits for having an internship with us. Essentially, we are maintaining about 50 interns, local and virtual, at any given time. Last summer, we had 64. We had 34 that were here. So they're actually coming here to live here and to stay here and do an internship with us. So
It's great.
So
And your Instagram feed is great and shows
I have
these
nothing
profiles.
to do with that. I have nothing to do with
It's
any
great.
I
of
know
social
he
media.
has nothing to do with that. That's why I brought up the interns. You gotta-
Nothing to do
The
with it.
interns are really good at that Instagram feed.
And I don't think I'm on it. I hope I'm not on it. I try to avoid
maybe I've seen you a couple of
maybe
times.
like the backside of me,
Yeah.
but not.
So it's so key that you're doing this work here on Cape Ann because climate change is local, right? We all know climate change is local. So, and you're doing this work with young people, as Mike Cavallo just brought up, he's getting back into mentoring.
Mike rocks.
And you've been doing this for so long, working with young people. It's also this great place to infuse inspiration.
Yeah.
I saw your folks at the Climate March last Friday.
Yeah.
They were right in front of me. I'm like, hey, Seaside Sustainability. Hey, way
Actually,
to go.
it's funny. I just saw a video of them, and I said, "Hey, that's Maureen in the background." Did they did you meet her? And they're like, "No." Did
You're not true. Are you serious?
Well, one of them did not know that you were. So sorry.
Oh.
It was one of them. You
No,
did
I
not
was-
say hi to one of them, apparently.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, no?
Sorry.
No, it's okay, it's all right, good.
But we saw each other.
Yes,
we were there
yes,
marching for the
yes.
climate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great.
Yeah.
What specific things are being worked on right now through Seaside?
We're working on some more blue tech. We just got an underwater drone that unfortunately doesn't pick up plastics, but it identifies them and has a 100-meter tether. It doesn't go where Michael can go, but it can go pretty deep, Michael.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, Michael. Maybe Michael can bring it down there. 100 meters, so that's pretty good. And
Yeah,
then we
that's cool.
are about to get a surface drone that will, it's called a bluefin, that essentially it's a autonomous drone that goes around. It's like a harbor Roomba. And, I don't think it's actually going to make a huge difference in the plastics or floating marine debris, but I think it will be a really great educational tool.
Gotcha.
So, and then the launch of NSTEM is imminent, and that's pretty much consuming
Yeah.
my daily.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's so great to
Thanks,
have you
guys.
on.
Yeah.
Thanks, Eric.
People
Corey,
want to
good
learn
see you.
more
Nice to
about
see you.
Seaside Sustainability, seasidesustainability.org.
Or they can go on social media, which I don't even know.
Seaside.
Yeah, check out their Instagram
Seaside
account.
Yeah,
You won't
yeah.
see Eric, but
Yes,
you'll see everything
I
else.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks
to
for
see you.
NSTEM.
Sure.
Thanks, Eric.
Eric, great news about Seaside Sustainability based in Gloucester and Rockport. Also doing work in Essex and Beverly. Our next guest
By
is
the way,
Denise.
Eric was our first 2 kiss guest. I'm jotting that down the margin here.
Is that a suggestion?
Denise,
Denise, you can
yeah.
get a hug.
The bar has been set, Denise. Oh,
We got to get Denise Donnelly in here. Denise is a Selectwoman from Rockport. And Denise, you've been working with these young people on the plastics bans, the plastic policies in Rockport.
Right.
It's been extremely successful. And there's 2 plastic bans. Could you take us through
Sure.
what's going on in Rockport?
Right. So last year, the town meeting passed a ban on single-use plastic bags. We learned a lot through that process.
Right.
We were so enthusiastic about getting this done with the support of the Green Team in Rockport. That is a group of amazing
Students, Rockport High School
Students.
Green Team, shout out.
Unbelievable.
Great work
Yes.
out there.
Great work.
Yep.
And so we were very enthusiastic about getting this bylaw passed, and we realized in the process change is hard. It's hard. And we really didn't take into account how it was going to affect local businesses, and they felt that we didn't give them enough time to make the transition. We did what we could. Seaside Sustainability was great. We got reusable bags from them and the shopping bags, but it really wasn't enough to help the businesses in Rockport transition. So at the subsequent town meeting, they put forth a proposal to extend the effective date. And so that will take effect on January 1st.
So plastic bag ban in Rockport takes effect January 2020.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And having learned that in that process, when we decided to move forward with the ban on plastic water bottles of a certain size and plastic serveware for takeout food, we thought, you know what, let's learn our lesson here and go out and have the interns from Seaside Sustainability go out and talk to the local businesses, get their input, get a sense of how much time they were going to need, and build that into the proposal that we put before town meeting. And that's what we did.
Yep.
So they now have a year to prepare, work through supplies that they have on hand already, figure out new supply vendors, and get prepared for this new ban.
So we're talking about single-use plastics. We're talking about water bottles.
Right.
We're talking about forks, knives, spoons. We're talking about food containers.
Correct.
Right?
Stirs.
Stirs and straws.
straws.
Yep. Those are all off the table.
Right.
Literally off the table.
Correct. Off the table. Yes. Yes.
So what does this mean for Rockport? Because we're coastal town, and we have a lot of tourists coming in. And what's the purpose behind the policy?
Well, the purpose is, together we really thought we have an obligation as stewards of this beautiful place to really do our part. We are on the ocean. And when people come into town, they want them to understand that we're a community that really cares about taking action and takes our role as stewards very seriously. One of the things the town is going to be doing is putting in refillable water bottle stations. So we're retrofitting existing water fountains so that you can refill a water bottle there. And then we're also going to be putting in 2 new stations, one at Back Beach, one at Barletta Park downtown, so that tourists can see that we're taking action to help them. We don't want people to go without water, obviously, but we want to do our part. We want to show that we mean this. We're serious. We're in this.
Yeah, it's great to see Rockport have this transition from, used to be very traditional, but it's moving forward with these policies. It has a Green Communities Task Force that's done great work.
They've done amazing work.
And that's
Yeah.
around energy efficiency
Correct.
for the town of Rockport.
Yep.
We're going to have Gregg Cademartori on shortly to talk about his work in Gloucester around this too. But things are so moving forward in Rockport around energy efficiency, around carbon emission reductions in the municipality. What do you know about that area?
Yeah, so I've been so impressed with the Green Communities Task Force. They've really gotten a lot done. And what I would say is what's quite impressive is the span of generations that's involved. So we have the Green Team on the one hand and students coming up through that group. So the seniors obviously will be graduating, but we have some really strong kids coming up the pipeline. And then we have the Green Communities Task Force who it's older folks who have more time on their hands to be able to dedicate, and they're quite committed to what they're doing.
Totally committed. Yeah, they're really going for it.
I was also impressed. I attended the Climate Crisis Action Meeting in Gloucester on Wednesday night. There were 115 people there from all over Cape Ann, and I was thrilled to see Rockport well represented. We had DPW commissioners, we had people from the Conservation Commission. It was a great event.
We're going to talk to Dick Prouty a little bit about that.
Good, yeah,
He's
excellent.
Here. Yeah. So there's so much work.
Did you want to touch upon crew at all?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Can
yeah,
you
crew.
mention that, because that's kind of a big deal too?
Right. So We got an email, the Board of Selectmen got an email earlier this summer from an organization called CREW, Communities Responding to Extreme Weather, asking if the Board of Selectmen would certify that this is Climate Awareness Week and then sponsor an event as part of this initiative that they were sponsoring. So we agreed to do that. The board did do that. And then last night we conducted our event, which was to have Catherine Glenn, the regional coordinator for the Commonwealth's Coastal Zone Management, come and speak at the community house. It was an excellent event. She did a wonderful job of talking about barrier beaches, of which we have a few in Rockport and all over Cape Ann, and the effect of climate change on barrier beaches. It was an educational event, kind of helping to inform citizens about the things that we need to be thinking about in managing those beaches as we move forward dealing with climate change.
It's a great thing.
Yeah, well
I'm
said.
so glad that you've done that, crew.
Yeah, I bet I was so inspired by Catherine last night and
Yeah.
meeting some of the speakers here today that we're going to do a series. I've already signed up
Super.
one volunteer.
Oh, great.
I'll be collecting cards from others. Yeah,
That's
so
wonderful.
We're going to do a series. Yeah.
Well, Denise Donnelly, thanks for all your
Thank
work
you.
as
Thank you,
Selectwoman,
Denise.
Yes,
and for
thank
being on
you.
Now We're Here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Appreciate
It's great
your
to
time,
see you
Denise.
again.
You too.
Thanks for your
Thank-
work.
Thanks, Denise.
Beautiful.
I know. So we are having a beautiful day out here at Hodgkins Cove, and we're going to be speaking with Gregg Cademartori next. He's the planning director. Gregg, come on on. He's
How
the
you doing, Gregg?
planning
Good to see you
director
again.
for the city of Gloucester. Gregg,
Good to see you.
great to see you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's lovely to have you on.
Yes, I'm
And I
very,
mean-
very fortunate to have worked most of my professional career in Gloucester.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful,
So,
and we're
it's a great place to be.
It's hot.
We're trying to sustain that beauty now, right?
That's right. That's right. It's heating up here. So, Gregg, you're the planning director for the city of Gloucester, and you've been involved in the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, also known around town as MVP.
Yep.
And that's a state program. Could you explain first what this is
Sure.
and how Gloucester has integrated it into its climate?
Yeah, I
program?
think one of the great things about all the speakers that you have on here is this really is becoming something that everybody is focusing on. And that hasn't been the case. Probably I've been here for 14 years, and when I first got here, it wasn't part of everyone's discussion, and now it is. And the state has really been an incredible partner for all the coastal communities, and now expanding their programs to really look at other issues that haven't been focused on too much with with the inland communities. So they've really tried to put a structure in place to make sure that everybody is having this discussion and understanding where their vulnerabilities are and what they're going to start doing to plan for it. So they rolled out a process to support kind of an engagement of stakeholders. We've had a lot of the same folks involved in this discussion again for the better part of the time that I've worked here. But really trying to focus it a little bit more, to think a little bit more beyond just the coastal issues, which we obviously face many challenges, and start thinking about what else you need to think about. And
So you mean the social side of things? You need
just
infrastructure, like
multi-layers, looking at what your needs are going to be for communication, because we
Right.
are probably going
Right.
to see more events where we're going to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But also looking at, in our particular case, we started to expand to look into what it means for our public water supply. So these are really things that are all the mechanics of everything that we do. We just have a new level, a heightened level of stress that we have to be thinking about, and how we may have to do things differently.
Could you give us some examples of the areas that are vulnerable to like storm surge, flooding?
Sure.
Because that with sea level rise, that's a big topic
Yeah.
on Cape Ann, and what's
And-
happening in Gloucester?
Sure. So we actually had done a lot of work in advance of the MVP program being rolled out. And actually, when we went for the initial designation, we thought we would just receive it because of all the work that we had already done. But back in 2015, we worked with the best in the industry from engineering and modeling perspective, with organization Kleinfelder as well as the Woods Hole Group. And we have on our city website very high resolution mapping of
It's very good.
Yeah, it was
several
a cool
scenarios.
report.
Yeah, it's
And
very good.
thorough.
When you start this process and you think out 2030, it's really around the corner, and also looking into the future at 2070 scenarios. And that's something that we as a city, as we engage in looking at engineering design projects, we're actually pushing the engineering community to be thinking about these things, whereas the typical tolerance that they have for risk is not as high as you think it should be. So again, I can't stress enough the partnership that we have with the state agencies, including Coastal Zone Management, to really go that extra distance as we look at these projects to really prepare for a much longer term.
So when you're looking at the Inner Harbor, for instance, where are the critical areas? Like, we know that the causeway floods, we know that the high school parking lot floods.
Yep.
But flooding, storm surge, where are those vulnerable areas?
Yeah, so we also have the great advantage of a lot of exposed granite and a lot of the coastline that rises fairly quickly and is actually not as vulnerable as you might think. Definitely the downtown infrastructure and the harbor is
That's a
where
hot spot.
we have to focus a lot of our energy. We know what happened in 2018 at the high school campus, so we've taken steps to look at designing infrastructure to fortify that site. And it's really a mix of you have to make decisions on where you're going to continue to try to fortify and protect, and then other areas where you have to make potentially other decisions to think about.
Room.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, for
So the Inner Harbor is key, and that's it's a very challenging to make those decisions, whether you're going to have more of a macro solution or try to figure out ways to partner to basically work your way around the harbor.
Do you have anything that you're working on in relationship to that, in addition to what you've been talking about at the high school?
Sure. So right now, actually, just this past month, now that there's actually two funding sources, we've had the advantage and I guess disadvantage at the same time of being a coastal community, of having support from Coastal Zone Management through the Executive Office and the Baker administration. But now the MVP program also is another potential funding source to help start solving some of these issues. And so we will actually be looking at the wastewater treatment plant, which is obviously very vulnerable. So we really have to look at things and prioritize in terms of, if there's an impact, what of our critical infrastructure would have the greatest impact in terms of duration and number of people being impacted.
So that would be the water supply. That would
This
be,
is on the causeway. We're talking.
Yeah, that would be the water supply, and that would also, like, the if it spilled over.
I mean, if you don't have the operation of your wastewater treatment plant, you have
it
gets really serious very quickly.
Very quickly, yeah.
So that's one of the focus of one of the efforts coming up this year.
Can we talk about the people side? Because when you're looking at vulnerability, you can also look at who's available. The communications that you were mentioning. I'm very interested in how cities are planning that. How do you reach the most vulnerable people? Is there a plan in place in the neighborhoods? I'm going to ask Val Gilman that question.
And I'm glad that she's here because there is obviously what we can do from a public safety perspective, and how those channels are worked to communicate with the community through both police and fire and through the administration during critical events. But getting back to and you also hear from Dick of just making sure that you understand where you live, who you live near, and going back. And if it's something that has to be revitalized, but just the communication among city streets, among your neighbors, is one of the strongest things that you can have, because somebody in that neighborhood will have an outlet to information as it comes in, but we got to continue to share that information as it comes along.
When you're talking about climate change in the city, whether it's in the planning department or citywide, and groups like the Clean Energy Commission and some other groups, what are you really focusing on right now in the city of Gloucester?
So we really do look at it on both sides of the equation in terms of greenhouse gas emissions or energy efficiency and renewables through our participation in the Green Communities Program. Again, I think we've been fortunate with our leadership in Gloucester to really go after every opportunity that's out there in terms of partnering. Statewide funding, different programs. Clean Energy Commission bridges the gaps with some of the other nonprofits that are involved, and the effort that just occurred this past week was just a great. Everybody is talking about this, and everybody knows that we need to be doing something about it, but trying to collaborate and focus and coordinate is really a challenge.
Yeah, there's some exciting things happening this week in climate and also here on Cape Ann. And Gregg, thank you so much for being on
Okay.
Now We're
Yeah,
Here.
that was
Great.
great.
Yeah, yeah, it was
It's
great
nice
to
to
hear
be
about
out of
that.
an evening meeting and into a setting like this.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gregg.
Thanks
Good
for
to
your
see you.
time. Really appreciate
Take
it.
care.
Wonderful. Gregg Cademartori, Planning Director for the City of Gloucester, talking about what the City of Gloucester is doing
Val.
around climate change. And we're welcoming City Councilor Val Gilman. Val,
Nice to meet
nice
you.
to see you. Come
Hi, Val.
on
Great
in.
seeing you.
you?
Thanks for
Good to see
joining
you.
us.
So excited! I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So Val is the Ward 4 City Councilor, and we're here to talk about your neighborhood.
Oh, great! I love my neighborhood. I live right up the street.
Yeah. Are there
great.
any
So
actual
cute.
like pressing issues going on in Ward 4 right now?
In
Well-
relationship to climate,
So in relationship to climate, we're excited that in Dogtown we have a new Dogtown Preservation Commission, and we're starting to staff up, and it's going to include our DPW, a Public Works Director, and our new conservation agent, and some people that are really strong in the area of preservation. So
Right.
we're excited about that because one of the areas that came up in our MVP study was the importance of protecting our watersheds.
that's right.
And so that's a big important issue. We're delighted that the seawall is beautiful now. We were able to take advantage of some great grants, and it's strong because that was really a vulnerable spot
In
for us in
Lanesville?
Lanesville. Yep, and the Cove. It's
Yeah, it's
terrific.
amazing work, right?
We came under budget, and we had a celebration with the workers, and it was so cool.
Yeah. So why is that important to fix the seawall out there in Lanesville? How does that protect the neighborhood?
Well, it protects it a lot, and we still have some commercial fishermen that have their boats in there, as well as many recreational boats. It protects the whole entire cove. There's quite a few houses in there, and it's just such an important part of the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
And so we were delighted when we were able to get that accomplished, and we're also. I'm very concerned about our zoning, and I know I'm grateful that our planning director and our community development group is working on the different type of zoning that we need to be focused on, because I chair P&D and I want to make sure that we make sure that our zoning, the city council is current and best practices for things like tidal surge and rising seas. So,
Okay, so let's talk about the zoning. What's necessary in the City of Gloucester, Ward 4, to address this through zoning? Like, what are the kinds of things that you are trying to either correct or make aware or make the change so that everybody's following that policy?
So there's a requirement that you have to put houses that are in certain locations 9 feet up for FEMA requirements, and would that become issues of the neighbors not liking the height because the house is already higher than they had liked? And so there are ways that we can learn from other communities and figure out how can we put that all together so it can be a win-win. We don't want people that have a lovely house someplace or a piece of property to be restricted, but at the same time we have to be able to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I think
does that apply to new construction, or is that any kind of construction
well,
that would happen?
it's both, because if a house is destroyed and then has to
Right.
be rebuilt, where can you
Yeah.
put that when it's rebuilt? Can you change the zoning a little bit so it's further away from
Interesting.
the rising seas? And those are the type things that are involved with,
Well,
with zoning.
Right, we see Cape Cod having this issue. I know that they have the cliffs, and the cliffs are being eaten away, coastal erosion.
Plum Island.
Plum Island up here,
Yeah.
is serious. I mean, we're on granite a lot of places, but there are beachfront homes. We're looking at, even Wingershik, and Long Beach and Gloucester, other things. So how do you approach somebody who wants to do that? Is it just putting a house up on stilts? Is it, is that what you're moving it back?
Well, our zoning does have those provisions now. We're just
Great.
trying to make it a little bit more proactive, because so we do have zoning that takes that into account, but we can get better, because as the tides become more ferocious, we need to be better
Right.
with what we're deciding that we're going to allow, and we have to be careful, one step at a time.
So are you hearing from your constituents about climate change?
Oh, constantly.
What are they saying?
Everyone's worried.
Everybody's
I mean,
worried.
I'm delighted that so many folks that are on our volunteer boards are from this ward, which is really cool.
Yeah.
whether it be for
You have a critical mass of work
I
for?
do. It's great on Clean Gloucester and the Clean Energy Commission and Town Green and Seaside Sustainability. We have a lot of people that are really charged up by climate change and they want to make a difference. So we really value that. I also just wanted to mention our kids. I spend a lot of time at Plum, Cove, and Beeman schools, and I'm a former school committee person as well. And they're doing this program in all of our elementary schools called Change is Simple, and it's absolutely
great program.
awesome.
Yep.
And we're so charged up about that because our kids are really starting to understand the impact of bottles and how many bottles one person drinks. And at Beeman, we figured there were 57,000 bottles a year in their 5th grade class when we did the session.
Oh, wow.
And so we asked the kids, well, what can you do about it? And one person holds up her Nalgene bottle and says, I use this. And so
Great.
we're getting the kids really into it, and the high school's doing some awesome things as well with our science class under
I covered
Rachel
some STEM
Rex.
programs over at Beeman this summer, actually. It's amazing work they're doing.
Yeah, our students are going to lead. They're leading now. Our young people are leading it. So we couldn't have young folks on the show today because of during school hours, but we did try to get the youth voice here, and it's wonderful to hear about what the students are doing, both at Gloucester High and Rockport High School, also Manchester Essex, and in the elementary schools. It's great to see these young folks taking this on as their issue.
Yes, absolutely.
Because we're getting tired.
Well, no, we are still fighting.
We're fine.
So I've got one thing. Do I have
Please,
another
yes,
minute?
yes.
So another thing that is really important to us is the evacuation process. And we've been without power for 3 or 4 days in that storm like 2 Octobers ago, and it was getting pretty chilly. And my biggest concern is making sure that people that are alone and aging in place have someone to partner with. And I'm very fortunate that Annisquam has a terrific Good Neighbors program where they link a good neighbor to a person that is homebound, doesn't have relatives, and they find a house that has a bed and a generator, and that person becomes that person's guardian during these storms
I didn't know
and
that.
checks on them.
This is what I was talking to Gregg about, that I wanted to know about that. Like, I love the ideas of neighborhoods working together, streets working together, really, to make sure that the most vulnerable are being protected and cared for, especially in a storm event, especially in the winter time.
Right, exactly.
yeah, so
and so
that's
I've taken
wonderful.
they have a wonderful brochure. I've shared it with the fire department. We're all looking at it as part of our evacuation process emergency. We need people helping the police and fire, but not getting in their way in a way that we can really make a difference if people are vulnerable in a horrible storm or. So it's
Very
exciting.
impressive,
There's
Val,
a lot
yeah.
going on.
Val, thank you so much for being on Now We're
Thank
Here.
you.
It's wonderful
Yeah.
to hear what's
I've
happening.
enjoyed it. Thank
on
you.
Ward 4.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Val.
Corey.
Val Gilman,
It's a
Ward 4
pleasure.
Councilor. Val, we'll be
you.
working with you a lot this fall for election season, by the way.
That's right, election season coming up. We'll get to that. So our last guest is Dick Prouty. Dick is the chair of Town Green 2025, a Gloucester group that's working on energy efficiency, carbon reduction all over Cape Ann, reforestation. And Dick, welcome to the program.
Thank you,
Great to see
Maureen.
How you doing, Dick?
Congratulations on a great meeting this
Thank
week.
you. And in the interest of full disclosure, Maureen is the co-chair with me.
I am.
Maureen?
Yes, I know. Conflict of
You
interest.
lead the show with that.
So,
So Dick, tell us
Yeah.
about the climate crisis action meeting that took place on Wednesday this week,
Sure.
and what was happening there, because it seemed like
well, the impetus for this came from a new sense of urgency. I mean, Town Green is now 4 years old. We started in 2015, but there was a UN report in late 18 that really got everybody on edge, because it said we have 10 to 12 years to really get our act together globally and locally before we start suffering much more intense storms and sea level rise and so forth. And we at Town Green started thinking, what can we do? We had a walk-on, Mark Nelson, who is a clergy who read the report and said, I'll give you 10, 15 hours a week and help you organize to address this issue. We had always had in our Town Green plan that we wanted to have a much more elaborate plan to get many more people involved, and this was our opportunity. So we worked for 5 months one meeting a week with an organizing committee, and it included Town Green Act members, but also the Cape Ann clergy of Cape Ann, a member of 34 clergy members. 7 or 8 of them attended our event. So we had an event this last Wednesday at the Senior Center, had over 100 people there. We had business people, chamber and so forth. We had students, teachers, city administrators. The CEC was heavily represented. City council members were there. Val was there. And we had a good representative cross-section of over 100 people from all of Cape Ann. And that was important. Early on in Town Green, we said, should we be just for Gloucester or should we be for Cape Ann? And we decided Cape Ann because the 4 communities are so intertwined around their transportation and all the things that lead into our mission of reducing our carbon footprint. We have to collaborate to do that more efficiently. So we had some conversations. We looked at rapid teaming skills that we're going to need in this complex environment over the next decade. And we came up with, our last question was, what bold ideas, if they were highly likely to succeed, would your table of 4 or 5 like to do? And we have 27 flip charts with lots of great ideas we're going to be looking at and coming up together for a follow-up meeting on October 23rd. And we'll be planning in several smaller groups what that meeting will be looking like. But I think we're going to have a good turnout for that. We've had a lot of favorable evaluations of the meeting from people who were very enthused about it. Gregg was at my table, Gregg Cademartori. The mayor was my next table over.
That's great.
She had to leave halfway through because she had an important school committee meeting. But there was, Senator Starr was there, and Margaret Ferrante was there. And she stood up at the end and made an interesting metaphor. She said, let's imagine that this is a public health crisis. And she said, we don't have to imagine it because it is. So let's take the public health model and imagine we had an epidemic. What will we do? How will we coordinate all of our resources? How will we get much more effective action between all of the parties on Cape Ann? And that's really what we're going to do. I mean, we're going to come up with a coalition type thing, not a new organization we imagine, but people staying in their organizations, but helping each other fulfill all of their actions in a plan that we will develop that will have both a 3 to 5 year thing and probably a 10 or 20 year iteration with a new vision. So that's where we're at.
So Dick, I want to invite Lisa Smith on because Lisa's part of our crew. Lisa's our floor manager and also been part of this Climate Crisis Action Committee. So Lisa, what did you experience as part of the group that pulled this all together? Because as a community member, and climate change I know is important to you.
Well, it was a great group of people. They were very committed to starting the organization and getting it going, to get people into a room and seriously talk about the climate crisis that is happening, and especially on Cape Ann. And so, we met for months, Thursday afternoons, for really long lunch hours, and we didn't know what would happen. And what happened was there were all these people from the community that were invited who came in and spent hours on Wednesday night to come up with ideas on what we could do as a group, as a community, to address the climate crisis, and it was very positive.
So Lisa, you have a 13-year-old daughter in the middle school here in Gloucester, and she's that generation that's going to be impacted by climate change. What do you talk about with her?
Well, she's very concerned about it. She's seen the calving of the ice in Antarctica, and she looks up the science on what's going on, and she's given up meat because that's her personal way of, and she loves to eat meat. She gave that up because of her carbon footprint. And so we went to the climate strike in Boston on Friday, which I was really proud that she did, and she had a lot of friends there, so it was a lot of fun for her to be there with her friends. But her and her friends were very passionate once the march started, and yeah, they're really concerned about their future. So it's great.
There's no Planet B.
There is no Planet B. No, but this is it. Like Neil Armstrong looked up and I don't remember the quote, but he was looking up from the sky, and all these astronauts, I've never had their perspective, but this is the only place. This is the only place.
This is our only home.
Yep.
That's great. Well, thanks for that perspective, Lisa.
All right,
Thanks for jumping on.
All right, I'll jump back.
Yeah, someone's going to manage the show today.
I know, Lisa's our floor manager. She's
On
helping with all
autopilot
the
for a
guests.
bit.
So, Dick, back to Town Green 2025 for a bit. Tell us about some actions that folks can take here on Cape Ann to feel part of the process, because we know that climate change is here. We know that it's projected to get worse, and everybody has a difference to make. And sometimes you can feel powerless in that moment as an individual. Well, what's this recycling thing? It's not going to make a difference, but it does make a difference, even though recycling is getting, things are changing in that realm. But what do you say to folks out there who want to get involved or make a difference?
Yeah, find out what your family and personal carbon footprint is. You can go online and do that very easily. It takes about 10 minutes. And then there's all kinds of suggestions for your driving habits, the kind of vehicle you have, the way you heat and cool your house, the kind of electricity you use. All of these things will help you lower your footprint. And the goal is to get everybody to lower their footprint to zero by 2030 at the latest. And that includes businesses and organizations as well as individuals. So Town Green is very dedicated to doing that, and we've had 3 sustainability fairs. We've got a new active website with a whole page on this event, and the Climate Crisis Plan is going to follow up about it. So if you go to towngreen.org, you can look at the Climate Crisis Action Planning and see what events we're having. I think we're going to have a new emphasis on public education, not just education in the schools. We have a curriculum initiative to have K-12 sustainability, project-based sustainability curriculum, but to have a lot of new initiatives that would get involved in the communities. I mean, here in Lanesville, we're fortunate that we have at Lanesville Community Center that's very interested. We have involved churches, the Lutheran Church, the Congregational Church.
The Temple.
The Temple is very involved. So we've got a lot of different clergy. So I would say get involved in an organization that fits your temperament and predilection, but also just find out what you can do personally and as a family, because if everybody does that across Cape Ann and across the country and across the world, it makes a huge difference.
And vote. Go to vote.
Yeah.
Right.
I just want to say, I think that when I first made this pitch back to about Town Green to Mayor Kirk, and I said, why do we want to do this? And the main reason we want to do this, we want to differentiate Cape Ann to be a leader in becoming carbon neutral. So Town Green is to create a carbon neutral community. And what I want to do as part of the plan going forward is to invite communities in primarily Europe that have already done this already. So there are Danish, German, Czechoslovakian communities that are carbon neutral right now. A lot of it is clean energy, but some of it is at offsets. And we can do the same thing. And when we do, we can get one of the benefits that they do is they are now eco-tourist destinations. This is going to be an increasingly big tourism issue, is where can I go to learn more to help my community? And we want to make Cape Ann one of those magnet communities.
Well, Dick, thank you so much for...
thank you for this show.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
learned a lot. This is a great show.
It's great, and congratulations on a successful meeting on the climate
It was
crisis
fun. I
and
really
all the
enjoyed
work
it. Yeah.
moving forward.
All came together.
If people want to learn more about Town Green 2025, how can they do that?
Towngreen.org.
Yeah,
There you go.
website.
that's great.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Perfect.
Dick.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dick. Really
Good to
appreciate
see
your
you.
time.
Well, that's all we have for our show.
Wow.
Wait,
That was a big show.
That was a big show.
Was that 2 shows?
no, that was one.
Okay. The sun's getting to me.
I know, yeah, it's pretty hot out here talking about warming. Thank you for watching and staying with us. We have some shows coming up.
Yeah.
For Now We're Here. Again, Now We're Here is a program in which we visit all of the communities on Cape Ann, and we do get to them either visiting directly on location or we do a show like this where we have representatives come in from all the communities to talk about what's happening.
Right. So yeah, in October we're going to be at Hammond Castle Friday, October 18th for a special Halloween edition. And you can see the new castle. There's a transformation going on. They're getting sort of away from the medieval thing and focusing on Hammond's inventions. So they're going through a huge transition. The following day, Saturday, October 19th, we'll be at the Rockport Harvest Fest. The following weekend on the October 26th, we'll be at Essex Clam Fest.
That's right.
And then Friday, November 8th, we'll be at the American Legion in Gloucester for a special circled around the veterans.
Yep, we're going to do a show on veterans and veterans issues right before Veterans Day.
Yeah, and then we're going to be at the Open Door Food Pantry the Friday before Thanksgiving. I think it's November 22nd.
Yeah.
And then at the Beauport Hotel sometime in the Christmas holiday season.
Yeah. So we have a full lineup of guests. We love doing this show. I think it's so much fun.
Want to do this every day.
I know, it's great to be on location, and thank you to Katie Kahl and the Gloucester UMass Amherst Marine Station for hosting us today. I mean, what a beautiful view out behind us. We haven't been able to turn around much to look, but it's beautiful, and thanks a lot, Katie. Thanks to UMass Amherst for hosting us.
And all of our guests today. Eric Magers, Denise Donnelly, Gregg Cademartori, Val Gilman, Mike Carvalho, Dick Prouty. Who else do we have in there today?
Gregg Cademartori, did you, Greg?
The art display.
Denise, Tom Starr.
Tom Starr.
And Denise Donnelly. Did you mention Denise? Yeah. Did we forget anybody?
No, I don't think so. We'll find out. You'll tell us if we did.
Sorry if
we have to thank our crew.
Yep. Thanks to our crew, our director, Becky Tober, our technical director, Matt McMakin, our floor manager, Lisa Smith, and our camera people, Don Epstein and David Lufkin, as well as our intern, Maya Gerard, and we can't forget Alana Horn, our production assistant. Did I remember everybody?
Our whiteboard artist. Yeah.
Thanks to Eric Archer, our executive producer and executive director of 1623 Studios. I'm Maureen Aylward.
Oh, I'm Corey, not Aylward, Val.
Corey Kukuru, and this is Now We're Here, coming to you live from Hodgkins Cove. Until the next time on Now We're Here, thanks for watching. Take care.